So we are going to continue our exploration of the out of Africa, first out of Africa movement, and we are going to go into the islands now with Professor François Semah.
Okay, thank you. Can you dim the light, please? Ok, Monseigneur Sanchez Sorando, Monsieur le Président, cher Yves Coppens, thank you for inviting me, and maybe such thanks are not just a matter of courtesy. So if you just allow me to open a 1-minute bracket about that and show you comment on fait, voilà, this photograph. This is Teku Jacob, a famous anthropologist who passed away more than 10 years ago, and he was Yves Coppens' close friend as well. Teku Jacob originated from Aceh province, which is the area in Indonesia, which is currently under the Sharia law. So it is quite a conservative Muslim area. And somewhat paradoxically, thanks to him, evolution was taught in some universities in Indonesia since the independence. And if we try to follow his tracks, doing research about origins of humans wherever in the world means that we must devote also part of our activity to the conservation and the protection of this heritage. And doing that, of course, we must invest into a strong capacity building dimension. J'ai un peu de mal, voilà. Capacity building dimension in our work. That means meeting with people, of course, and that means collaborating with universities, especially in Indonesia. We must collaborate with universities where the religious education is quite strong, whatever they are, meaning Islamic universities or Christian universities. And one of the difficulties is to bring that message, to discriminate between knowledge that is built by us, by humans, science, and the part of the education that is revealed. And that's why I would like to thank you a lot, because your academy, through meetings like the one we hold today, plays an important part in that effort, and that has to be highlighted, because you help us to play a part in what we should call social responsibility of science. Okay, that being said, we go back to the Asian landscape, which, and that was noticed by everybody in that room, is going to be more and more complicated and complex, say, especially thanks to recent discoveries or datings. Whatever it can be for older periods, everything on that slide is ancient, as you can see, except, of course, the picture of our young friend at the top. And even more complex if we look at younger periods. Alors, the comparison with older researches is quite interesting. Dubois made quite modern scientific work in Sumatra at the end of the 19th century. And as you can see on that slide, he was congratulated by the Société d'Anthropologie de Bruxelles for the significance of its discovery in Payakumbuh, West Sumatra. And it's a place which is quite interesting because it was highlighted again a couple of years ago by the dating of the presence of what is likely to be Homo sapiens in one of the caves he excavated there. Okay, I suppose you know this paper from Westaway and Al. And this kind of comparison between ancient researches and new researches is quite interesting. Dubois, when he had to clean the inner part of the training skull, a little bit like Ron Clark is carefully cleaning Littlefoot, faced some perplexity, as you can see in his own manuscript, and tried to understand the significance of his discovery. And this is almost the same perplexity that is faced by present researchers, especially regarding the possible link between their discoveries in eastern Indonesia. Of course, this is the application, the simple implementation of the parsimony principle, but they try to trace a line and to make a model between something which is quite ancient, the Matamenge mandible, and Floresiensis, which is quite much younger. Of course, these discoveries imply a lot of models. Everyone among us and outside is publishing its own. And such models are only the picture of our perplexity regarding what is a puzzle in space and also a puzzle in time, in which we can notice that the periods that are highlighted on the slide are maybe among the most important to excavate currently and in the near future in order to understand what is the title of the symposium. Okay, why those two periods? Of course, the Middle Pleistocene. Just for information, when we work in the islands, we are keen, for various reasons, to have a non-conventional boundary for the dawn of the Middle Pleistocene, and we like to begin almost around 1 million years. That is the period when large corridors appeared on the Sunda Shelf, allowing better allowing, of course, the dispersals. Maybe opening the roads to the Philippines, the northern road through Palawan and the southern one towards Mindanao, and of course facilitating maybe the dispersal towards eastern Indonesia. For the more recent period, after a quite severe MIS 6, we have the high sea level of MIS 5 with two very sensitive areas, the Malacca Strait and the Kra Isthmus, and again, large routes opening, large river systems joining at the center of the Sunda Shelf between what is presently the main islands, and contrast in landscapes that can go to from pure savanna upwards. You see the present savanna in eastern Java. It's very small, but it exists, and the tropical rainforest. Okay, I will restrict myself, knowing time is limited, to two examples. Okay, the well-known site of Sangiran, and southwards what happens in the Pacitan Punung area in Java. Bon, I do not have to present you the Sangran Dome, just underlining the period that is of interest for us today, above the so-called Bujangan layers. And I will briefly present only two sites in the northwestern part, the Ngebung site, with the early so-called Kabu or Bapang beds that are marked by fluvio-volcanic sedimentary sequences, and in a specific place just above the basis, which is made of weathered volcanic ashes. The first sandy deposits resulted in two kind of glue, mixing sand and clays, and were able to fossilize. Sorry, it's quite well dated at 0.8 million years, and could fossilize Homo erectus former occupation floors, including environmental clues such as bamboo casts, leaf prints, etc. Association of several kinds of objects, including lithic artifacts and fossils, and yielding a fauna which is quite convenient for the moment, with a dating at 0.8 million years at the beginning of the Middle Pleistocene, and which could be described as a late triennial association, especially by the study of the cervids. Paradoxically, we know very little about those humans. You see one of the couple of teeth we recovered from the site, and we learn more by looking at their behavior. Alors here we find the classical Sangern flakes published by von Königswald since the late 1930s, but we find also abnormal and big artifacts like these ones, including in ivory, and some of them closely resemble what is called in India the large flake Acheulean, and you see here two cleavers that can be compared with one that was recovered by my colleague Hubert Forestier, but not under stratigraphical control in Sumatra, and that could reflect dissemination towards the archipelagos of the Acheulean tradition. Some of these artifacts are made in alloctonous rocks, and we have sedimentological and stratigraphical arguments to document that their provenience is not linked with the river flows, but that they were brought by humans. That gives us a very preliminary and very rough estimates of the extension of the territory occupied by those Homo erectus 800,000 years ago. This is not anecdotic for us. It is a very preliminary approach of that question of territory, but knowing the complexity of the biogeographical approach of the past that we need to develop in Southeast Asia, and we shall go back to that question later, it is, according to me at least, quite a promising way of considering humans in the islands. After Ngebung, we tried to have a comparative approach in the southeast part of the dome, the Puchung site. You see here the transect. And the site we excavate is very near the one where was discovered Sangran 17, which is conveniently dated also at about 0.8 million years. It was a site with numerous stone bolas that we excavate. It's a bit different from Nebung in the sense that it is not almost undisturbed, almost in situ occupation floors, but it is an accumulation that results from the destruction by any catastrophic event like flood or volcanic eruption of a neighboring archaeological site, archaeological floor. So here we try to excavate the sandy and ashy layers to reach what is in the lower right corner, the fossil floor of a rivulet, which is constituted of very compacted volcanic ashes. And here you can witness the actual shape of the rivulet bed at the time. Alors, no problem, in fact, in excavating such a layer, the concentration of objects, the faunal remains that are slightly transported, here Stegoden skull, usual artifacts like in Nebung, the big ones, including, once again, imported artifacts, imported raw material from Sangiran, though several characters are a little bit at odds, including part of the artifacts, this kind of microbola that you can see in the center, and according to the anthropologists, the quite modern character of the few human remains we find here, though they are found in close association with a fauna that is absolutely normal for what we call the Kabu or Bapang beds. And we just realized that there was a problem. Everyone since the 1930s, and including our team, mapped the site as belonging to the Kabu or Bapang beds. The fauna is totally convenient, except maybe for the size of several animals, like the suid, which is quite small. And we do not have, it's a pity, the dating as yet, it's under work, though we are now convinced that we touch here much more recent layers in Sangiran. The apparent contradiction with the fauna might not be an actual problem. This is a slide which is taken from one of our younger colleagues who defended his PhD last year, and which presents an original view of the Sangiran fauna evolution. It is not a succession of biozones, but much more a progressive enrichment of the paleobiodiversity that we can witness in Sangiran. And that questions us about the work in biochronology that was done since the 1930s. First by Königswald, who collected fauna, then arranged them in a chronological order, and by our friend John DeVos. I made that picture for his retirement seminar 7 years ago. John tried to sort out in von Königswald faunas which faunas were composite and which were coeval from one stratigraphical horizon. And then he made a refined chronology, and that is maybe the point we can discuss, put that like biozones. Making biozones in such a time and space puzzle is something that can appear difficult. We know that the contacts with the mainland were numerous and repetitive. Jeffrey Schwartz recognizes, together also with Kaifu in Japan, several morphs within the population of Homo erectus at the dawn of the Middle Pleistocene. We spoke about the lithic tradition, possible disseminations, and we know, of course, that numerous immigrants enter the faunas. With maybe also the specificity of hominins, and why not of big apes, it always seems strange to me that we can find in forests not only the dwarf hominids, but to find them in such impoverished faunas, just elephants, stegodon, reptiles, and since the Middle Pleistocene, rats. But we have hominins. So there is something also special in the dispersal. And when we consider that puzzle, we can learn a lot, maybe in the future, regarding Java Island itself. By making biozones in Java means that Java was a single object, which was not necessarily the case. You can have separate islands, you can have also islands in islands. We do not have time to elaborate on those biogeographical questions, but barriers can exist. Example in Bumiayu and Semedo, westward from Sangiran. The stratigraphical succession is more or less comparable. Around 2 million years ago, we have the progressive immersion and the appearance of the first fossils. Recent discoveries are not very well stratigraphically controlled in the area, but you find fossils that were never found in the Sangiran area as yet, including several kinds of primates that are presently also under study. That means that we have to question that approach by biozones in Java, and that it is absolutely possible that you find several provinces in the island. These could have been actual islands before, or separated by kinds of different ecosystems like forest boundaries, etc. And such a way of thinking maybe can be applied also for the second period I mentioned, namely the very end of the Middle Pleistocene and the late Pleistocene itself. And we come back here with that huge question of the most derived Homo erectus that everyone now discuss concerning their age, and their age might well be late Pleistocene. Alors, this is a question that was sounded somewhat paradoxical, especially to John De Vos. John De Vos cannot understand, and I agree, why when you study the Solomon, you find association with Stegodon. When you study the Pacitan and Punung area to the south, you find only Elephas. So for him, there is a discrepancy which might be, in his view of biozones, a chronological discrepancy, but it might well be also a barrier. Now, beyond the debate about the age, the precise age of the most derived Homo erectus, we see that there is a very strong difference between the non-long fauna and the so-called Punung fauna. And in Punung, you have this discovery, which is also discussed. That tooth was found by von Königswald and described by Badu. In the fissures in Punung, it was first described as Homo sapiens by Storm and recently discussed by Polanski, telling that it covers also the Homo erectus variation. In Punung, of course, all the fauna is linked with the rainforest. You find pongo, you find elarctos, you find the tapir, etc. And here we excavate in the Gunung Sewu karst, not far from the Indian Ocean coast, and we could recover in caves sections, stratigraphies that go down to within the Middle Pleistocene until something like 350,000 years ago. These are the various archaeological levels recovered in the cave. One of the most interesting is the lowest one, in which you find a continuously, apparently homogeneous lithic industry. This is not an evidence, but it is a data, which is continuous between 300 until somewhere near 85 end of MIS 5 level. The first part of the filling is definitely alluvial, but at the top of those layers, we find actual occupation floors documented, among other, by the number of microfaunal remains, by burnt stones, and by fresh artifacts and fossils. Within those layers, you find traces of the very strong karstic activity during MIS 5 in the shape of mushroom stalagmites that embed at their basis the actual sediment of the layer, and then that felt. It's like when you put some crème chantilly on your strawberries before eating them. It is very fragile. And here appear a very tiny human fossil, which is a decidual tooth, which, according to our colleague Sofwan Norwidi, is closer to Homo erectus than Homo sapiens, but this is not the topic of our discussion today. Above is a definitely different kind of layer that you see here. Just you see the last occupation floor covered by, after MIS 5, a thick ash, just to avoid the discussion. It is same age about as the Toba eruption, but it is not the Toba eruption. You can find some fossils embedded in the ashes, and above a very normal cave filling with numerous blocks above the black ash, and within that filling you find another tooth. Once again, according to Norwidi, this tooth is closer to Homo sapiens, but it is not the topic of our discussion. Just to show you that that question of human occupation in the southern mountains of Java covers also the question of diversity of humans who occupied the area during the late Pleistocene. I just took that opportunity, Amélie, to update you. J'ai fait ça un peu lâchement, mais it was an opportunity for you to be updated. Amélie is kindly giving a hand to us for Sofwan Norwidi's PhD. Okay, so the debate about the von Königswald tooth is not fixed as yet. Our internal debate regarding what is the lower tooth is not fixed also, but we have this small lithic evidence that the artifact seems continuous between 300,000 and the end of MIS5. So let's see in the future. So that is the game we play. And this game is not far to what was told by Yves yesterday regarding the plasticity of our species, or even the porosity, coexistence, cohabitation, or even more, like in the photograph. We do not know. The slide is quite fastly filling up now, as you see by the discoveries, but if we look at it, it is not full as yet, so we still have work for several dozens of years. Thank you very much.